Welcome to the Whole Truth of Marketing. I have with me Samir Singh. Quick intro, Samir is the ex-CMO of Unilever's global personal care business. He's a 27-year veteran in Unilever and one of the longest serving marketing veterans in the company. One of the people that I look up to most when I think marketing. He used to be my super boss when I used to work at Unilever. He also became my first investor when I decided to start The Whole Truth, and now I can proudly say that he's more a friend than a super boss or the great marketeer that I know him to be. I learned deeply from him, and I'm so happy to have him as the first guest on our podcast.
Absolutely delighted.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Samir, you've traveled all the way from Singapore for this. I really appreciate it. Samir, quickly, why are we doing The Whole Truth of Marketing? You know that I started The Whole Truth because I felt that brands have lost consumers' trust over the last half a century or so. And if brands have done a bad job, that must be the marketeer's fault. But then when I think of it, who's the marketeer? You and I are the marketeers, and we are not bad people. Then why is it that brands are failing us? Then I left the corporate world and came over to the startup side, and I noticed another thing, that actually everyone's confused. I talk to founders and they feel that they're not able to tell their story. They have deep stories to tell, but they're not able to tell it. I talk to big company marketing teams and they're all chasing the newest startup buzzwords of performance marketing and digital marketing and ROAS and this and that. And I go to startup marketing teams and they're actually chasing big company marketing teams and saying, oh, how do we do brand building marketing and what is purpose-led marketing? And then they'll make a 7-minute long purpose film and realize that it does zero sales. So it's a hot mess. And I want to do this podcast where we bring in the best marketing minds that I learn from, that I know, and really just get to the bottom of what the bloody hell is the whole truth of marketing. That's the intent. I have certain questions that I want to ask you, but we'll flow within those boundaries and see wherever it takes us. And to kick it off, let's grab it by its head. What is marketing?
Yep. No, I think first I want to say, before I go into what is marketing, I have no idea. But what a pleasure it is for me to come to your office and see what you and your team has built. I think you're building a genuine brand, because I come across so many startups in India and outside, and a lot of them are built for this sort of 5-year cycle of when they'll sell out to the next person. I think you're trying to build a brand for the next 20, 30, 100 years. And that the nature of those brands is such that goes slowly, and I think by those standards, you have put a sort of a rocket ship into orbit. And now to see your team here in this physical setting, makes me very proud, and huge congratulations. So it's an absolute privilege and honor to be part of your first podcast. Believe me, I have as much to learn from you guys as you have the other way around. What is marketing? I think it's the art and science of identifying, satisfying, fulfilling demand.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, marketing is linked to demand creation, to demand fulfillment. And I think there is both art and science in it, like you said. But the way I've always defined for myself, after I think the first few years, once I had made every kind of mistake possible, and once I had done all the wrong things and the right thing was the last option left, I realized that the kind of work we do, we provide consumers, the people who use our products, these joyful experiences. And on a brand like Dove or Lifebuoy or Axe or all the great brands I've worked with, you do that 1 billion times a day.
Yeah.
And how do you ensure that each one of those experiences is truly joyful, frankly, in categories that consumers can't even articulate?
Yeah.
If they're using a body wash, unlike an iPhone, they're not going to tell you, why they loved it or liked it, other than in the most generic terms. But the fact could be that because the cap did not close properly and didn't make the right sound. That lady abandons her shampoo. But you will never come to know, she will never articulate it, you will never understand. So when So sometimes I do say marketing, and of course it's a self-serving statement, is like rocket science, because it is bloody difficult. And experience, skill, knowledge, humility teaches you, how to do it better and better over time.
Yeah.
And the framework that I use for myself, I've talked about it a couple of times before, is that marketing is about the small p of purpose. Because I think we are obsessed in marketing with the big P of purpose, saving lives, saving the world, saving this, that, many things that don't need saving.
Everything's a Avengers
But
movie.
for a brand to go there needs license to talk about it. The great brands like Dove and Nike and Coke do that, but they've had 100 years of license to go and talk about it. But what you need to first do well is the small P of purpose, which is the everyday joyful experience. That every time when she opens the bar of whole truth, does it tear properly? Does it make the right sound? Does the bar come out in the right way? And when it crumbles, that there is a reason
it crumbles,
that it crumbles, like chips slightly, I don't want to say.
Yeah.
But I think that for me is marketing.
I want to double click on a few things there. First of all, let me react to, thank you so much. Like, I think without you, the journey wouldn't even have started. You were the first person who had faith. And I think the speed at which we've grown, honestly, is proportional to the trust deficit, at least in the categories that we operate in. It's just that the vacuum was so large that we got sucked in to consumers' households. When you talk about marketing is about the small p before the large P, if I remove the large P, and everyone I agree is like save earth, low plastic, this and that, all of that is happening, why do we need more brands? Like, 50 years ago, I understood that, you were having khula namak, khula atta, Tata came and said, I will brand it, take 2 rupees more, but you can trust that maroge nahi, ye wala atta kha ke, right? But why do I need more brands anymore? She's happy with her Dove and Sunsilk, etc. Why do we see so many startups coming in and building, and chipping away at the big companies' heels? What's happening there?
People are not able to articulate the things that they are missing out on. And therefore it is the job of the marketeer or the businessman to find what that unarticulated need is. And by the way, this is one place where deep tech works in the same way as FMCG marketing. What I mean is high involvement, low involvement. Wherever you are, like before the iPhone was invented, no one said that they were unhappy with their BlackBerry. In fact, they were very, very happy. And so I think at every point in the evolution of the world, there will be entrepreneurs and businessmen who will find out an insight in the market. Insight is something which is obvious in hindsight. So when Dove said soaps dry your skin, it sounds very obvious now in hindsight. But in the 1980s,
people
no one had said
it. Soap,
And therefore they invented a soap which was not a soap. That because it didn't dry your skin, it actually deposited moisture, and therefore the 1/4 moisture. So I think at every point in history, this will keep happening. You will keep disrupting categories. I think there is a double-sided nature to your question, which is why so many brands? Because I think, let's face it, 80% of those brands are not needed.
Don't deserve to exist.
They're being invented. They don't deserve to be invented because they're being invented for some commercial reason, or some bright person from McKinsey or saw a particular segment opportunity. But I would argue that that's not the secret to longevity of brands.
And also to pick up from your point of view, that exact noise of the cap clicking, we know perfume zara sa change karne se experience change ho jata hai. We know what happened on one of the oral care brands where we kept reducing menthol a little bit over 10 years, it compounded to being not good. I think the magic in marketing, because there are the 6 Ps and there are 10 more that we've not been able to articulate because it's about human beings and emotions and what we feel, the permutations and combinations of that can exist
are endless.
And where that magic lies, like I think to be a good marketeer, you actually need to be an anthropologist. You need to understand evolution and psychology, etc. But I want to, you said the word insight, and honestly, that's one of the words which is missing from the startup marketing lexicon. Like, we take it for granted in a Unilever or a P&G because insight-led marketing is all we've done. It's either missing or grossly misunderstood. Can you give me a few, like 2-3 examples of super powerful insights from your careers on which you've seen $100 million brands being built on that insight?
I think the biggest which I was involved in, and at least the revival of it, was on Lifebuoy, and this whole thing of germs are invisible, and most people in rural India thought that germs are like creepy crawlies on your skin.
Yeah.
So, but what does that lead to? The consequence of not washing your hands leads to diarrhea, pneumonia, and diseases which you can easily avoid.
Yeah.
And for a long time on Lifebuoy, we had started doing things which were about, hey, if your child does not fall ill, she will not become an engineer, he will not grow taller, or, healthy kids. But healthy kids is not an insight. Healthy kids is an observation, it's a fact of life, and a million other brands are doing it. But when we dialed it down, we didn't ladder it up, we actually laddered it down and said, actually, if a child does not fall ill, that is the biggest payoff for a mother.
Yeah.
And therefore, the functional insight of Lifebuoy is also its emotional insight, which is your children will fall ill a little less often. You don't need to say, and that's why you will feel like that.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to tell a mother or a father, what is it to have a sick child? You've had recently got a baby.
Yeah.
And you realize that even a 99 temperature completely spoils your day, your week, and then if it extends. So, or on acts, the foundational insight of saying these acts is for boys who want to win in the mating game. And I think that acknowledgement that boys to win over girls go through a complex mating game because they're coming out 15, 16-year-old boys.
Yeah.
That is an insight for the ages.
Yeah.
And to build a brand on that through fragrance. And by the way, when Axe went away from it and went into the big P of purpose without having the license. So Axe for a time, for 3-4 years, started talking about toxic masculinity and how it would remove toxic masculinity. It was beautiful advertising, like that.
Yeah.
But people were like, what the hell does Axe have to do with it? To me, that is insight, to look beyond the obvious, but as a result of it, liberate a big business opportunity.
But I have a society level question here, because I honestly believe that, we don't talk about it enough, that this small group of people called marketeers actually have a outsized impact on the cultural zeitgeist, right? Like 80-90% of all comms that hit me originated in some marketeer's mind nowadays. So what we think, believe, see is all a marketeer. So marketeers having their, for those who know how to do it well, it is, you could call it the ability to manipulate at scale. I can sit in an office in Andheri East and do something which will move 1 crore people a little bit, nudge them a little bit, which is very, very powerful. And hence having the right incentives, doing the right thing is very, very important. And then when you hear stuff like marketeers have insights which the consumer can't articulate, you're like, shit, these guys know something about me that even I don't know about myself. What are these, like, do you have these 2-3 things that you discovered, like you understood about a consumer that she couldn't articulate or he couldn't articulate about themselves, that you can tell us?
But I think before that, I want to come to this thing of marketing is manipulation. Because I profoundly disagree with that thought. Because I think marketing is manipulation. Let's take a political campaign where, marketing is used in the most cynical way possible. My argument is that that does not survive. It might survive for an election cycle, it might survive for a particular launch, it might survive for a few, even couple of years maybe, but not beyond that. Because, like Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people all the time, all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And therefore, I subscribe to the other end of that view, which is of course very self-serving, which is that marketeers are actually great. They are very powerful agents for doing good in the world.
Yep.
And some of the greatest insights which have been revealed, admittedly to sell stuff.
Yeah.
These are not purely insights which were altruistic.
Yeah.
But those insights which were revealed have done a huge lot of good in the market, which is not just curing illness and removing depression. I'm not just talking that kind of stuff, but the invention of a carbonated drink, Coke, sort of led to, I would say, many, many moments of pleasure, affiliation, etc. And I'm sure at some point we discovered, or maybe someone knew it a bit earlier, that it had huge amounts of sugar, and that was not good for health.
Yeah.
And that resulted in another change in the marketing, in the innovation, in the product. So I think most people, I generally am a glass 3/4 full kind of guy. That also makes me naive at times, I think. But I have an optimistic view of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, you will always get some, to use my favorite example, Donald Trump, who can make, asses out of people for a long time and be very dangerous for the world.
Yeah.
And those movements happened, we saw what happened in Europe in the 30s and 40s. But in the end, I think commercial marketing, the way we know it, usually in the end has resulted in good stuff, but not good stuff as always measured by the commons and saying, the highfalutin stuff. But, I'm putting the small p of purpose, I'm giving that a lot of
Basically,
importance.
I know your philosophy, which I completely agree with, is that life is lived in every moment.
Yeah.
And if you can create 10 more moments of happiness in a day, and if marketing can do that, it's very... But since we are talking now, the philosophy stuff up front, before I go back to the nuts and bolts, I've always felt there are two things that a marketeer can do with their brand, with the power that they have. They can either go to where the consumer is, or use the brand to bring the consumer and hence society to where we should be. And it's always a tug of war. It's always a balance, right? Like Fair and Lovely has been the poster boy of this debate, that on one side it is, society says that fairer women get married easier and get jobs easier. I'm just going where the consumer is. And one side, like, no, you should bring society where it should be. Why don't you use the pedestal that the power that you have? In today's day and age, which side of the spectrum do you like?
No, like literally, I'm not trying to duck that answer, but it is both, right? It is both. And I have seen the pros and cons of that approach. Like if you take our biggest brand in Unilever, which is Dove, if Dove is a soap that doesn't dry your skin, that means its formulation is something which for tropical climates leaves like a slightly, an after effect of, which is a bit smooth. But people are looking for a squeaky, dry feeling after taking a bath. Now, does that mean we change the Dove formulation in order to win in South Asia and Southeast Asia? And I think experience has taught us that when Dove goes to the market and tries to behave like every other soap, it wins in the very short term, but loses in the long term. Which is why Dove waits for the consumer to come to its philosophy. So it's not just even its real beauty philosophy, but also the philosophy of
the product
what
philosophy.
its product is.
That's very interesting. That's one of the things that, again, I think is not common knowledge. We, especially in the startup ecosystem, we love dissing big companies, that we will disrupt them and change it. But the level of detail of communication insight, speaking to product delivery, that entire unbroken chain of events is so deeply crafted that what I'm saying in my comms and then what my product is delivering have a seamless link. And how do you bring a emotional insight into a physical product payoff is a science in
I
itself.
think the greatest brands have that end-to-end integrity which you're talking about, and which is very hard won. It's been one person hasn't done it. It has been done over many generations by doing the wrong things and then realizing that actually those were the wrong things, and then coming to some sort of discipline. So whether it's Coke or Kellogg, all the great brands of the world, Kit Kat or who have stayed true. And I think it happens also with new startup founder-led brands.
Yeah.
I mean, what I like about the whole truth is that you guys are willing to defend a point of view. And if you were to not defend it so zealously, I could argue that in the short term you could get a bit more growth out of it.
For sure.
But if dates are the way that you will provide sweetness, or you will only use less ingredients and not use preservative, and that will lead to sort of bars which are not of the right consistency. But all those are to the service of a larger purpose.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you will have the license to talk about the big P of purpose, which is that you want to change India's food habits. But if you start talking about India's food habits and talking all that big stuff,
Yeah.
without showing the discipline and the sacrifice
Yeah.
that it needs, then you won't have credibility.
No, absolutely. In fact, the insight behind that entire campaign also was every choice has a cost.
Oh, is it? Okay.
And the cost is the proof. So show the proof, right? So, but now coming to as you said, it's a many people over decades have worked on these brands and have built what they stand for today.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the atomic unit of brand building, the brand manager,
Yeah.
right? Who changes every 2 to 3 years on a brand. So a few questions, and you can choose to answer them in whatever order. One, for the audience, first of all, what's the job of a brand manager? Because when I was back there, product was made by R&D, sales was done by the sales team, media was bought by an agency, ad was made by an agency. What's the job of a brand manager? A. B, hence, what do you look for? Because it's such a, magic versus logic, art and science, left brain and right brain, requires a very complete sort of human being to run, a brand. So what do you look for there? And third is the culture question that over 100 years, a brand has had deep roots. And now a new 25-year-old MBA kid comes in without any of this conversation of, what's the history, what's the past, what are the roots, where have we come from, and hence where are we going? How do we ensure, how do you ensure that that unbroken chain remains unbroken?
Now, these are difficult questions. Let me try. I think I remember what I've always believed in, even as brand manager and now especially. I think the role that the brand manager plays, which no one else plays either in the organization or in the agency, is the voice of the consumer. And the voice of the consumer sort of lies at the core, and all her roles kind of radiate out from that. So, it's the voice of the consumer in an advertising, because when you go into an advertising discussion, there'll be the big shot founder or the head of the EVP or the brand, and who will make the creative decisions, and there'll be a big creative director on the other side. Those two are the most important people when you're cracking a big idea or writing, a big campaign. And then there are a lot of people in the agency, a lot of people, there'll also be a brand director or someone between the brand manager and the top guy who's making the decision. So there are too many hierarchies in people. So my thing used to be, as brand manager, what could I bring into the thing? And actually my boss had taught me about this, was bring in the voice of the consumer, because you know the consumer better than anyone in the room. And that doesn't mean just keeping on meeting the consumer, because a lot of time direct meetings with consumers also lead to crappy rational thinking. But it's about knowing the consumer in her milieu, in her context, the insights behind her lifestyle, and then seeing in her life how your category and brand impact. If you know her at that level of intimacy, then when you write the advertising brief, when you mention the insight that becomes the creative jumping off board for the creative director, you're able to bring something which all your experienced bosses and all the people on the agency, even the planner, are not able to bring in.
Can I just jump in there? I have a burning question there. Then if that's the job, then would you choose someone who is just like the consumer in that job if you had a choice? So if you're creating a mom's brand, would you find a mother? If you're creating a teenager brand, would you find someone who's young and not a 40-year-old? Would you get the brand manager to as closely mimic the consumer, because then they would intuitively understand the consumer?
I think I'll be very honest about that. I have worked mostly on brands where the consumer that you were serving was just not the target profile that we recruit into these companies.
Yes.
You know, it was a woman consuming your shampoo in rural India, or somebody in New York, sort of, and you were not recruiting these people into the company. I think if it happens in a category where you need that kind of person, I can see the logic, but it does not disqualify someone who is not that particular racial or gender or sexual identity from doing, because I think then you are literally saying that humanity and intelligence and sensitivity doesn't matter unless you are that person.
Yeah.
Right? And if we followed that logic in every other thing, it would just lead to ridiculous things. So I think it has some relevance, but it's not the.
So then answer that. What do you look for in a good?
So coming back to the brand manager thing. So I think I just gave you one example of what is voice of the consumer in communication development.
Yeah.
But imagine that in innovation development.
Yeah.
And we have seen that with examples. When you were brand manager working in my team, you had a certain ability to suss out what the consumer insight was. Someone else had a better ability to suss out how to craft a mix and how to craft it for perfection. And all those people are different. And then as you realize what people's strengths are, you say, okay, hey, you're about absolutely uncompromising aesthetics. You have a certain feel for a certain kind of consumer. Come, you will work in premium skincare for us. You might be a man, you might be a woman, doesn't matter. Hey, someone else, you understand all these mass brands really well. You understand, what people are feeling in rural India. You can really empathize with what a person goes through, even though you don't live that life don't live that life every day. You should do this certain thing. But it all comes back to the core that you are manifesting the voice of the consumer, whether it's in innovation, whether it's in running a project, whether it's in the supply chain that comes, whether it's talking to R&D and telling them what kind of products to craft. And I think once you do that, that forms the foundation to do bigger things in marketing. Because soon you'll handle multiple brands, you'll handle a P&L, so on and so forth.
Clear. What do you look for in a brand manager when you hire? Let's say he or she is not like the consumer they are going to serve.
Yeah.
What do you look for then?
I think a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding complexity and contradictions, someone who is acutely aware of their own strength and weakness, and particularly when I ask the question, what is your weakness, can give the answer which is a genuine weakness.
Yeah.
Someone who's had varied experiences, someone who's done big achievements but also faced some failure. So I think that kind of thing. And I think someone who can synthesize things and make complex things simple.
I love how, sorry, go on if you were saying something.
Yeah.
I love how all of these are human traits. These are basically the technical stuff is table stakes largely, especially when you're recruiting into a big company, people are coming out of a big B school, etc. So it's the...
I think it also might have to do something with the fact that the marketing that, at least in my time and for some time later, the marketing that they taught in B schools was really bad.
Really bad,
Really irrelevant if you think of the kind of stuff that we had to do.
I keep telling, most of our team is 22 to 25-year-olds, first or second jobbers. Many of them haven't done their MBA, but they want to do an MBA, and they ask me, does that really teach you a lot? I'm like, I can tell you, marketing तो मैंने MBA से नहीं सीखी, बिल्कुल भी. Like Kotler is the first book to burn on an altar somewhere. And stuff. So
and I think that sort of when you're coming in raw, the route to marketing expertise is through the consumer.
Yeah.
And once you are with the consumer, then actually using your background, so you could come from a small town in Madhya Pradesh and have only Hindi medium education, and you might have felt that you're at a disadvantage. But actually, you find that that is a strength when it comes to dealing with a certain kind of brand. And so relying on your past experiences, being open, curious to the world, I find those things become very important once they're built on the foundation of a consumer. But if you're not familiar with your consumer, we used to have this thing called a consumer license. And we used to say, unless you've spent 50 hours with the consumer, you don't have license to talk in a meeting. Because then you're just talking from prejudice. It's a Fair and Lovely consumer, oh, she must be having this kind of issues. No, actually, when I met my first consumer who used Fair and Lovely, I realized this was the most evolved person I had met, and the brand was playing a role for her that was so different from what all the stereotypes had told me that this brand did.
That plus really, if when one gets into a marketing job, if someone frames the problem, the assumed definition of marketing is किसी तरह से माल और बेचना है, right? And what we are discussing, it's actually, can you uncover an insight about this consumer that she hasn't articulated yet, and use that to deliver a product or a service that can make her life better every day? Then imagine the impact that you can have in millions of people's lives, right? Like that would inspire me to come to work every day excited.
Absolutely.
But it's rarely articulated like that, which is why I wanted to do this conversation, that, you know, and we are also, I would say, in sometimes, at least early on, we are guilty of, we had painted marketeers as the villain, because every brand needs, you know, if you're the hero, then who's the villain? And then I was like, actually, I was the marketeer, and I don't feel that I was that bad a person, right? So that's what led me down this path of, ki, let's define marketing hoti kya hai, right?
No, and also to the first part of what you said, a lot of times when I talk to the startup VC world, I mean, they're being polite to me, but I know the unsaid thing is, so what's the big deal about handling a 100-year-old brand? All the work has been done for you. And I think I really feel, having lived one life but having tried to understood the other one, that both worlds have a lot to teach to each other. And if you're saying that they're running to each other to learn these things, that's a good thing. We should encourage it. Because there's a lot that the established brands and the big companies can learn from the startup world. And there is a lot that the startup world can learn from some of the best brands about how things are managed. Because I can tell you, and you would know, that running a 100-year-old brand is bloody difficult.
I was actually going to come to that.
Because how do you win market share when you are at 50% market share?
And A, and B, relevance. That like, if Unilever was started by Unilever brothers selling margarine, because post the depression people didn't have cheap calories, so they couldn't afford butter, so they had to make margarine, right? Like, if that brand isn't alive today, but the Sunsilks of the world and the Doves of the world, and these are also 50-year-old brands, they were started in a completely different context. How do you think about keeping the brand relevant, so saying something which is with the times, but still holding on to the core of why the brand was born in the first place?
No, and you can smell this from a mile, because when you talk to people in the brand team, and there are a lot of people, there'll be some who will have this approach. And I would argue those people need to be removed. They need to be weeded out of the team and put on something else. Because you have to love that brand. There could be different routes to coming to that love, and it might take you 3 months, 6 months, a year. But if you're not in insane love with that brand, the way a founder is with his brand, then you are not doing a service to it. Because only when that happens do you respect the archaeology of the brand, so you know what is to be kept consistent and what has worked. And you are also its biggest critic, and you know what needs to be changed. And the second thing I would say is, how do you keep brands relevant? Look at what Byron Sharp says, like, are you getting new people in? If that cycle breaks, then that brand is condemned to die a slow death. And some of these great brands are great enough that a couple of years of that, they'll still survive it. But if that's been happening for 10 years, then you lose it. And therefore, getting younger people into your brand constantly is very, very important. Like on Lux, for a long time, we had lost the plot. A lot of it was because the product wasn't as good, the fragrances weren't as good. And when we reformulated the fragrances, when we redid the advertising, brought it to its core, but went into new categories like body wash that were growing. We are getting younger users into the brand faster than at any time in its recent history. And that's what has made the brand turn around.
I want to quickly talk to the viewers, and you spoke of Byron Sharp. It's a book called How Brands Grow, one of the defining books of marketing. Search it on Amazon, get it. One of the best books on marketing that you'll read, most data backed. If this level of deep love is required for a brand manager to be a good brand manager, then how does a Samir who's heading 10, 15 brands, selling in 20, 25, 30 countries, or I know even larger, 50 countries, how do you switch hats? Like, how do you get emotional depth into all the brands that you're leading?
And the honest answer to that is, I don't. Because I'd be lying to you if I told you I had that same insane love when I was handling Lifebuoy or Pond's or Vaseline or Fair and Lovely. I think the way it happens is, my job is not that. My job is managing the portfolio for maximum growth.
Yeah.
And that portfolio has a set of price points, brands, positionings, geographical, competitive, which takes a huge amount of my time, both in terms of brain power and execution, to have the strategy. So my biggest job is managing the portfolio and the P&L, which makes these sort of multi-brand companies run complementary to each other. But then the second job is still on the brands. But there, I want to have almost independent entities that are pulling for their brand. Because if you leave the portfolio job too much to the brand people, then everyone is second guessing. So, the common refrain you'll hear in companies is, hey, if this brand says that, will it hurt my other brand? If you say body wash is better than soap, will it hurt soap? People have been saying they are better than soap for the last 100 years. Body wash, shampoo, face wash, and soaps are doing pretty well. Because it's an amazing product format. Right? So even in America, after all this, 30-40% of the market is still soaps. So when you're running a brand, you're running that country. And that country will maximize in whatever way it thinks fit. Of course, the person who does the portfolio, which is me, will bring some sanity to it. But you want that madness, that love. You want to live, eat, sleep, and die that brand, everyone in that brand team. And that's how you get great brands. And then, because, the other thing which I think you will realize as the brand grows and grows is that consistency is very difficult. That's the phenomenon of the new guy coming in. And it's not the 25, 30-year-old brand manager who does it. It's the 50-year-old EVP who makes all these changes on the brand, what they did to Nike. And now Nike is suffering because you are so eager to say that what came in the past is wrong. The worst senior managers are the people who can't give credit to what has happened in the past. And they are not just the worst marketeers, but they also are the worst business heads. Because you take business decisions when you change a brand's positioning, when you change its formulation, when you change strategy, change the pricing. And like, again, Byron Sharp says, consumers, because these categories are not important for consumers. We think the consumers are thinking about our products and our category for 0.01% of their time. Nothing in life could matter less than this. And that is why I call it rocket science, because you're marketing a brand or a consumer to a person who doesn't give a damn about you. So, and then when you're changing stuff, changing the ad, changing things, you're not there when she thinks about you for that 5 seconds. Or you're unfamiliar, you've changed your red color to pink color, whatever. And that's when big blunders happen in marketing.
On that one, hopefully, it's very early, we're 5 years old, we want to live for 100 plus, so very early. But it seems to me that the only answer is what the brand is, like the baseline of it, for us 100% honesty and truth, has to be culture. It can't be reliant on people changing, can't be reliant on time, etc. access. And what that does is, at least the boundary conditions are defined. Within the boundaries, some good brand manager might come out with a great creative that says our story very, very well. Someone comes, does a mediocre job. But at least what we will never do will never happen. on the outside. And that's where I feel that meaning brands versus feeling brands, meaning brands have a edge. Because if you truly mean what you're saying, right? Like we are not just open happiness or something else, right? It's not just a feeling that we are evoking. Eventually the feeling is of trust. Our job is slightly easier if we are clear on what the meaning, like why we exist, is deeply rooted in some purpose, then it becomes easier.
And in fact, let me ask you, since you've been asking me all the questions.
Please do.
Because I really admire, it's something that I had wanted to do on some of our brands, but frankly, I don't know whether we never had the guts or we never reached that stage, which is that you talk fearlessly about a brand's weaknesses or why you made certain choices. You kind of open up the kimono and show people, whatever, radical transparency or radical honesty, etc. Because it's a high-risk strategy. Because what happens, and I've seen it on Dove, that once you go that route, then people don't allow you even the smallest infraction or the smallest contradiction, which they would allow a more dishonest brand, let's say, or a less honest brand. So how do you deal with that?
So, A, it's a choice, and we know the cost of this choice. B, we are very clear that we are the only ones who can take this risk, because वाकई में हम झूठ नहीं बोल रहे हैं. Like ऐसा नहीं कि बाहर कुछ बोल रहे हैं और अंदर कुछ बोल रहे हैं, right? Like you listen to us in any room. If I'm talking to an investor, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to a friend, I'm talking to consumers, I'm saying the same thing because that's the bloody truth, right? So, and doing what we do as it is comes at a cost. There is a product cost, there is a, there are 100 constraints that I place on myself that my competitors don't have, right? Right from, we keep talking about it, like if I put 1 drop of preservative in my product, shelf life doubles, returns reduced by 90%, I have a 10% EBITDA positive hit that comes directly, right? 1 drop. Every day I live with the cost of not taking that choice. अब उस कॉस्ट का कुछ बेनिफिट होना चाहिए, बट वो बेनिफिट तभी आएगा व्हेन यू विल डंके की चोट पे स्टैंड ऑन रूफ टॉप्स एंड टेल दिस स्टोरी.
एग्जैक्टली,
राइट? सो कॉस्ट तो हम ले ही रहे हैं.
एग्जैक्टली.
तो कहानी क्यों ना बताऊं, राइट? द ओनली फियर इज कल को मैं नहीं होऊंगा, मेरी कोर टीम नहीं होएगी, वो नहीं होएंगे, तो क्या उस टाइम पे किसी ने अगर बिलाई किया तो द एंटायर थिंग विल कम क्रम्बलिंग डाउन, बिकॉज एज यू सेड, वीव, and rightly so, we are now put at this level of scrutiny, right? Like you cannot deviate even a little bit, right? But hey, the speed of growth that you are witnessing is also because of, the consumer is also giving you the, like she's really dipping into her pocket and giving you all her money, saying, तुम इतने सही हो, तो मेरा सारा पैसा ले लो, लेकिन किसी दिन मेरा ट्रस्ट तोड़ा, तो then I will take all of it away. Again, benefit तो already ले रहे हो. उसका, right? Then the only thing to solve is longevity of the promise. Answer comes back to culture. And we can only build that culture if we really damn fucking mean it. Which we do. So we are like, जब ये सच है अगर, तो चलो, let's go to the edge and.
No, it's quite a daring approach, I have to say, and I'm really rooting for it to succeed on a long term. I think it's succeeding in the. I
think that's the real question. कि कितना लंबा चलेगा? The one thing I'm hoping, and it's already happening. See, at least in the current set of people, etc., and till founding team members, everyone is around. I'm fairly confident कि now we'll be okay. Now there is, people also understand the financial linkage.
And I love that thought of embedding this in culture, because frankly that's the biggest fortress that you build. But tell me, I had a more trickier question, which is that does radical transparency mean that you talk also about what might be an issue with your product? For example, you talked about the bars crumbling and then gave an explanation, but some people could say, hey, the calorie count of the Whole Truth bars is high. How do you, like, is it something that you will talk about?
Absolutely. In fact, you'll see us talk about it very soon. And I'll tell you both the philosophical reason and the business reason why I think we must. Philosophical reason is very simple. Some people are saying it, that, why should I spend 250 calories to have 12 grams of protein? I can do it much more efficiently. And we know as storytellers that this is a point of tension. Points of tension are where the best stories originate. And I have a philosophy. and every philosophy means that I don't have 100 other philosophies. And I'd rather get 100% market share of the 20% people who believe in my philosophy than try and get 20% market share of all people. Yeah. So whenever I talk about the complaints against our product, actually I'm not talking to the complainant. I'm talking to the people who believe in me to convince them that लोग कुछ भी बोलें, मैं टिका हुआ हूँ अपनी philosophy पे. So I will do
No,
it.
and I would highly encourage you, because this is what you're saying just now is revolutionary. Because this is the art of having subtle differences or complexities, or just accepting that nothing is perfect, has gone. We don't have it in marketing.
Yeah.
So for you to go to a consumer in marketing and say that, look, accept me because of my 75 great things, and hey, but I also have 5 imperfections.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal.
And it's been a path, Samir, that we've cultivated an audience which now is happy listening to long form from us. So I get the space to bring in nuance. Right? That's could I have had this conversation at scale on day one?
Yeah, no.
But thankfully I had the blog before this. So I had been having that conversation with 1,000 people who were the springboard from which the brand started, and we take that responsibility very seriously, that we must cultivate our own set of people who are willing to go deep, not just listen to superficial stuff. Which brings me to a tricky question for you, that for all the marketing gyan and knowledge that the big companies have, why do they suck so badly at starting new brands?
Because I think I started 10 new brands in my last 10 years, and 8 of them have failed.
Chalo.
Because I think it is deeply embedded in the DNA and the business model. And when I mean DNA, it's not because big companies don't have the people or the resources to think of great new ideas. Actually, that is a big misconception. I can tell you, in some of our categories, the ideas that the brand teams thought of and that I funded were some of the best ideas that I've seen in the category. But a lot of the times, those new brands are very difficult to house, because you see the way a P&L works. Actually, it's not something that startups like to hear, but the P&L structure and the way startups are funded is much more conducive. Startups get a much larger free hand than you can get in a running company.
Yeah.
Because when you start with a P&L which is at zero, where does the advertising budget and the mental and physical availability, all that budget has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it comes from your core brand, from your Dove and from your Lifebuoy. And that makes the core brands then lose a bit of their thing. And even a 30 bips market share loss is enough to then have people panic on, why is the new brand getting funding? Why isn't it performing fast enough? So let's extend it more. So before it's ready, it's already spread out far too thin into many distribution channels. And that's when a brand dies.
But then is acquisition a good idea? We see big companies.
So I think acquisition, so you have to buy P&Ls. You have to use your balance sheet more and buy P&Ls. And those, there are many, many more examples of big companies buying these brands at the right time, at the right size, and the right geography. Like we did for Indulekha. We've done it outside on many of our prestige brands. P&G, Nestle, they've all done it. And those brands are doing well. So it's not that big companies are hostile places or people are bureaucratic or lazy.
Yeah.
I think that's like the easy explanation from the outside.
Yeah.
But it's like your current business model does not allow you to create in-house. And of course, there are exceptions. And I've also had a few exceptions. But then those are very typical, different retail environment where new brands had the license at that particular time to suddenly go big. But those are very rare.
Funnily, Indulekha is one of the few examples of a brand which was acquired and did well in India in the recent past. I think the reason is it was profitable, many other things, but it was profitable. It was a P&L when it was acquired.
Yeah.
In most cases, when a loss-making, VC-funded, हम बहुत तेज grow कर रहे हैं लेकिन हमने आज तक पैसा नहीं बनाया, brand has been acquired at that stage, 90% of cases are not done well in a big company, and then, as you said, patience ran out after 3 or 4 shareholder meetings when analysts stopped asking about it, people stopped caring about it, and went down the drain. Samir, I want to close with, and then the team has interesting thing for us to react to, which even is going to be news to me also. But I want to close with any one campaign that you did in your lifetime that's closest to your heart, or that gave the best results. But start with, what was the business problem, what was made, what was the communication objective, and then finally what happened to the business.
So this is like choosing a favorite child. There are many on Lifebuoy, Vaseline, Dove, Fair and Lovely, Axe, etc. that I could tell you. But because I referenced it earlier, let me talk of the Lifebuoy one, where in 2010, facing the problem that we were of the brand becoming too common, too cheap, and talking a more sort of so-called evolved emotional story, we went to something which is the insight I talked about, which is the biggest thing that you can tell mothers is that your child won't fall ill. And if you can convince them that something as mundane, as everyday, as ordinary as a soap can have a role in preventing that huge payoff, actually you have the next 100 years done. So we did something which is a campaign that no one ever talks about, because people love to disregard in all these marketing discussions conventional campaigns. And at some point you should show your listeners that, or show your viewers that campaign. It's called the Strike 2 campaign from 2010. And it just said that these, 2 children go into a doctor's clinic, 2 different mothers. And they're like, oh, my child has got skin rashes, the other child has got diarrhea. And the doctor says, both of you come in at the same time. And the mothers are like, hey, but we've got different stuff. But he says, but the reason for both is the same. That these invisible germs from your child's hand are going to the mouth. And therefore, this is what you need to do, and that's the role of Lifebuoy. And that, with other things, one thing is never responsible for a turnaround. But that really started the journey, and I think Lifebuoy in that very mature market has grown at about 15-20% every year for the next 4 or 5 years, led by campaigns which were similar. So that didn't get any talk. Well, it was the biggest thing. The one that got talked about was the Gundappa campaign, which is the father walking on his hands, where we created the world's largest behavior change program, which is teaching children hand washing so that children don't die of diarrhea and pneumonia, because 1.7 million children are still dying every year under the age of 5. And it was so difficult to communicate these numbers, these statistics. The moment you start talking, people's eyes glaze over. And I actually briefed this to the low Lintas team, to Balki and Sagar, etc., in a fit of anger. And I remember we were 10 people from the brand team and 10 people, and we met at the Land's End. And we said, the brief that we gave was, let's make an ad which for the first time will show a child dying. So I wanted to make an ad that would be so shocking that people would have to talk about it. But that's the difference between the client and the agency. And at its best, the agency takes a creative leap that goes far beyond. And the way the agency took the leap was, Sagar and his team was to say, we will show a child reaching in the age of 5 for the first time. And it's a father walking through fields on his hands. And then when he reaches, a lady is like, why is he walking on his hands? He reaches a temple. And he says, because he's...
this is the first kid who has reached 5.
He's thanking God because this is his first kid who has reached 5. No, he says, because his child is reached 5 years of age. So she says, so what's the big deal? Like, why did he walk in his hand? Because it's his first kid who reached 5. And that completely, like the reaction that ad got was just amazing across the world. We showed it, like President Obama commented on it. We got all the awards at Cannes. It did nothing for the consumer. Because when you showed sort of a normal mother in India, they were like, okay, now this has nothing to do with Lifebuoy. Because it did talk germs. So all those things which, the most creative people hate, which is mentioning a brand early, which is having a product window, which is saying what the brand does, showing a germ visual. Actually, those things are important, I'm sorry to say, because we are not in the business of making art cinema or even in the business of making cinema. We are in the business of selling a bloody brand, a product. And that needs help through advertising. Advertising is not the be-all and end-all of our job. That's just a means, right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. On that note, there are other creative people in the world who've done creative things, and the team tells me that they've chosen a piece of advertising which will shock us.
Okay.
And it's our job to then decode it and figure out what the hell was the brand manager thinking, what might have been the brief, what might have been the business problem. So
I love authority without responsibility.
Can we have the... ये तो देखा हुआ है कैंपेन.
और जनाब क्या चल रहा है? जनाब हिंदुस्तान में तो फॉग चल रहा है.
सोचिए मत, क्योंकि बिना गैस वाला फॉग ही है इंडिया का नंबर 1 परफ्यूम बॉडी स्प्रे.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think ads like these come out of a brief. I feel this is an idea that comes to a great creative director, and they then call up the client. And if it's a great client, they'll see the thing. And I want to be very honest that I might not have accepted this idea. And the first time I saw it, I didn't like it. But you can see the iconic nature of the idea as it keeps repeating. And also depends on the brand, the way it's doing, all the other stuff it's communicating.
It became common parlance. Like, आज भी लोग बोलते क्या चल रहा है तो.
So I would give my left hand to be in culture like what it finally became.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I suspect it came from...
इसमें वो कुछ, there was some history to it also, right? Like this, what I don't know, and you might know, कि when this came out, was Fogg already the number 1 or was it still number 2 and yet
No, I think it was the number 1. I think the ad that made it number 1 was No Gas.
Was the No Gas one.
Yeah, and this was a few years later.
Because I found it to be a very creative way of saying we're number 1.
Your leaders, yeah.
Right? That क्या चल रहा है तो मतलब Fogg चल रहा है, and they had like 5-6 different versions of this running.
No, and it tapped into a deep cultural insight, which is the way we talk to each other, which no other culture does. No culture has that. I've learnt it having worked in global marketing, that when you go and tell people, hey, what's happening, they're suddenly like, what do you mean what's happening? Because that kya chal raha hai is a uniquely Indian phrase.
But I know you said it wouldn't have come from a brief, but इसका अगर brief कोई लिखने बैठता तो the brief would have been लोगों को बताना है that we are number 1 या कि सबसे ज़्यादा Fogg चलता है.
Or like make us iconic, like embed us in culture. Yeah, but it comes from a slightly arrogant place, which is, in my view, not a bad place to be for brands which are in that sort of market leadership position.
Because I remember there was some brand that we were launching in India which was Japan's number 1, and you asked कि डालो इसके ऊपर Japan's number 1 दिखना चाहिए, because that gives a feeling of okay, this will be safe.
And again, it's one of those marketing cliches that are derided, but actually putting sort of doctor recommended or dermatologist recommended, or putting world's number 1 or Japan's number 1 now in India, these are extremely powerful claims, especially when you're introducing a new brand.
Got it. You want to do another one? Yeah. I thought तुम थोड़े ज़्यादा eclectic ढूंढ के लाए होगे, like वो JK Cement वाली एक है ना?
Do you like this ad? No. Yeah. That's why he brought it.
That's why he brought it.
Because I think the brand has also lost its iconic feel, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer that brand.
Yeah.
So I think that's also an important point.
It was the brand at least was functionally, it had a benefit that no one else had when they came in.
Yeah.
And then they had a rebel nature to them.
Yeah.
When everyone was zigging saying ladki milegi, they were like gas ke laga rahe ho. Okay, play hit.
Bisleri, drink it up.
Wow.
This I'm
I
quite,
hadn't seen this.
this I'm quite clueless about.
Yeah, you can see the brief.
Deepika Love.
Yeah, that too. No, but I think it's about make Bisleri cool.
Cool.
And cool usually means the lazy interpretation is put it in a club, in a party, people, young people dancing, and yeah, put in Deepika.
Was there a, she was sitting in this expensive car, etc. Was
Yeah,
there
make it
some
cool and premium.
angle to it also, perhaps from a
Yeah, I think it's both a bad brief and obviously a very bad
execution. Because I would have understood, like, there are people who've done like the liquid deaths of the world who've
Yeah.
taken water and made it a beverage
Yeah.
of choice.
Yeah.
But वैसा भी कुछ नहीं था कि मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि it would have been interesting अगर बोलते कि we are encouraging लोगों की पार्टी में भी पानी पिया करो.
Yeah.
मतलब
Yeah,
तुम्हारे
that's
को,
a good.
it make it cool to have water in a party.
Like showing people not having alcohol in a club. But,
like
again
Deepika
and
walks
again-
in and says
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
straight up, right? Like so, हाँ ये तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं समझा मेरे को कि and honestly the execution also was quite
Terrible.
हाँ
Because
मतलब
the party is not really a party. It's like
कहीं किसी की रैंडम छत पे एक गाड़ी खड़ी है जिस पे पार्टी हो रही है.
which is like another one of the big issues that I find in when you're making lots of advertising is that you give a lot of importance to the insight, to the brief, to the creative process. You know, agency से 100 script लिखाते हैं, ये गलत है, because you know you're just not deciding. पर जब shoot करना होता है, you say अब तुम्हारे पास 3 हफ्ते हैं, 4 हफ्ते हैं.
Yeah.
But I would say invest a lot of time, effort, and money and talent into getting a director, into getting a production house who will elevate the script. Because one of the biggest things about cinema, about the moving picture, is that it can really, you know, it can be quite different from the way you imagined
imagined
it
it.
on the script.
Yeah.
And a great client and even a great creative director is very open to that.
But the counter to that, which I didn't ask when we were chatting about marketing in big company, small company, like that ad campaign that you were talking about, the our bar crumbles, which we internally call the food is flawed series. We made it for whey protein also, taken all our flaws and made advertising on it. It was made right here,
Yeah.
shot by this team, written, executed, edited in 5 days.
See, because that's your shtick.
Yeah,
That's your calling card.
yeah,
If we were to do an ad like that on Lux, it would be a disaster.
yeah.
So I think it depends also on where the brand is in their journey, but most of all on what the brand is. Because you're looking for that raw nature of the execution in order to get to the radical transparency, right?
But do you also think, I agree, like these are two extreme examples, but there is a production budget hangover in the large companies also that it's sometimes been taken to the other extreme also.
There is, yeah. There is a laziness
Yeah.
of saying, sab kuch, you know, Bangkok mein shoot karo ya whatever, and then that kind of adds to the budget, cast this, cast. So there is some of that happening. But the bigger issue I see is that because we are making far too many creatives and ads.
Yeah.
You know, what you need is a few of them. Like some of our brands like Magnum or Lux do it well, where you invest a lot of time and talent into that final shoot. And that leads to something special.
Because
But yeah, it's a way of,
Yeah.
and it's no longer the only route
yeah.
to making big successful
What we
ads.
find is, and you can see it on Instagram Reels in general, that actually production value and reach are inversely linked. That the more raw, the more voyeuristic, the more
that's interesting.
in my house this is who I am,
Yeah.
the film is.
Because that's more authentic.
That's more
and,
authentic,
more real,
and
yeah.
it gets more
Yeah.
reach, which gave me another insight about this one when we were talking, that most probably ना तो brief लिखने वाले को और ना approve वाले करने वाले को पता था कि marketing क्या होती है. मतलब I hope they are not watching.
Yeah, you're now going into authority without this.
Because I have seen this time and again. A startup raises big funding. The next thing they do, the formula is big celebrity,
Yeah.
expensive location, big director.
Yeah. No, and so many startups have told me when I've asked them, why did you do this?
Yeah.
They're like, no, to show this world
Yeah.
that we are being successful, you need to be on TV, you need to be with a big star. So it's like the tail wagging the dog.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end this. And I can go on. Like, there are so many rabbit holes there that I want to chase, but I appreciate you taking so much time to have this conversation, and hopefully through this and the future conversations we can unravel a bit more of what marketing truly is, and redeem the marketeer.
Yeah. No,
in the process.
I really enjoyed myself.
Thank you.
Because obviously who doesn't enjoy just sort of riffing on the thing. But I also, just to finish one point, that I also approach this with a deep sense of humility. So while we are talking about it, at some point you mentioned, what does a 25-year-old brand manager bring to the picture, and hey, are they changing? But actually, as you would have realized with your team, I did when I went back to HUL in 2015, that having more sort of younger people in the organization really, really made it so much more flexible, creative, actually made us a sharper company, because we were now getting genuine, authentic inputs from a type of person that earlier had a much smaller voice or who were more diffident.
Yeah.
So I think that is the humility more and more that I'm faced with, and especially as we go into the new world of digital and data, and also this kind of this social idea, which I think you have, but not all the big brands have in their campaigns, which is an idea social by nature.
Yeah.
And that I think has really helped when you have younger people in your team who are embedded in that world.
Do you miss that job? Do you miss the brand manager job where you were on one brand, deeply in love with it, deep into consumer insighting, and then making the creative rather than being the guy who's strategizing on top?
No, I don't. Because 50% of a brand manager's life is not glamorous. I love being their boss. But I think the reason I don't miss it is because I still get to work on brands and businesses, and I have a lot of genuinely fun and enjoyment with the team. We didn't talk about it, but like both of us were saying, like for 27 years I worked at Unilever, and every day I felt I was going to college. I looked forward to going to office, and because you were working with a set of people who also became your friends. And I think this kind of Western notion that is also coming to India of this division between work and life, and hey, there should be a wall, and no one should be your friend. I found it the easiest thing in the world to hold people who were friends accountable. Whether in low ratings, low bonuses, that was never the problem, and they also were very comfortable with that. But the upside of it, which is the kind of ideas you get, the kind of creativity, and just because ultimately marketing our kind of brands, happy marketeers are the best marketeers.
100%.
You can't have unhappy people dredging away, cursing the boss, constantly under pressure, produce campaigns that give joy or produce innovations that give joy.
Oh, 100%. The biggest things I've learned from you, that you can be best friends with your reportees for like a decade. And still hold them to the highest standard. The other thing which I've noticed when I saw you leading 10-15 brands is you never know which Samir is turning up today. Is he the strategizing top level, MC sitting Samir, or is he the one who's going to come and fucking write the brief? And because there is a certain craft to this, and I think no matter how high you rise in the marketing hierarchy, just making sure that wo haath ka kaam, the craft remains alive,
absolutely,
is just so critical. Otherwise you just lose touch with the creative, the magic side of it. completely. So that I've learned big time from you. Thank you so much, Samir.
No,
This
thank
has
you.
been a
Loved it. Thank
super
you.
pleasure. Thank you so much.